you ever been out camping and you're there at the fire, but you have to leave? You need to go get something, or you have to go do something. And so you leave the light and you walk into the darkness. And as you leave the light, you go into the darkness, there's this sense of anxiety. What is it about the darkness that causes us to be nervous? Or what is it about leaving light that makes us scared? Why is it that there's this sense of security when we're in the light? Is it because in the darkness we can't see where we're going, we don't know what's around us? Or maybe it's because in the darkness there's this sense of emptiness, or this feeling that we're alone. It's this feeling of seclusion. But when we're in the light, we're able to see what's around us. We're able to see the things in our path. In John chapters 8 and 9, Jesus finds someone who is in the darkness. And in both chapters, he says, I am the light of the world. In John chapter 8, Jesus is there in the temple and he's teaching the people. And the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, they bring this woman who was caught in adultery before him. And they say, the law of Moses commands us to stone this woman. What do you say? And they're saying this to trip him up or to trap Jesus. And I just imagine that as they're saying this, they're picking up stones. The Pharisees, teachers of the law, even the crowd maybe is picking up stones, getting ready to stone this woman. And I just imagine this woman before Jesus, and she's so terrified. Her sin is out in the open. She's before Jesus. She's got all this guilt and shame around her, and she's facing death right now. She's facing people who want to kill her. And Jesus says probably the best response he could, and he says, let the one without sin cast the first stone. And when Jesus says that, the people and the teachers of the law, it says they began to walk away one by one, dropping their stones, walking away until it's just Jesus and the woman. And Jesus says to the woman, does no one condemn you? Then neither do I. Go and leave your life of sin. And just the next verse after that, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Jesus takes this woman who's in a very dark place and says that he gives light. In the next chapter over, Jesus is with his disciples, and there's this man who was born blind. He's in a physically dark place. Jesus spits on the ground, makes some mud, and puts it on the man's eyes and tells him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. And Jesus again says, I am the light of the world. In both instances, Jesus comes across someone who was in a dark place. Maybe they were in physical darkness or they were in spiritual darkness. And both times Jesus says, I am the light of the world. In both instances, Jesus finds someone who is in a dark place. In John chapter 9, we had the man who was physically in a dark place. He could not see. And then in John chapter 8, with the woman who was caught in adultery, she was in a spiritually dark place. But both times Jesus brings them out of their darkness, out of their dark place, and brings them into light. He allows them to see. And Jesus says to his followers and to us as well that he is the light of the world. He says that if we truly want to be able to see, we have to follow him. And it's only when we follow Jesus that we're able to come out of the darkness and enter the light.
Keep coming to my
For the next 6 months or so, just as it becomes my turn, we're going to be looking at these I am statements. So we're doing a 6-month-long series, so get excited. And we're going to be looking at these I am statements that are found in John that Jesus makes. And for most of the sermons, not all of them, we're going to show a video like we just did. Each is going to kind of have its own intro video like that. Trying something new. Thanks to Hal. He's the one who's filming, editing, all of that stuff. That one we filmed at Marty's house, and so Unfortunately, there was a little bit of wind that night, and so that was that noise you heard. But today's is our first one in this series, and we're starting with the statement, I am the light of the world. And that's found in John chapter 8, verse 12. And as I was planning this series out, I had a hard time thinking, what's the first one that I'm going to start with? You want to start off something always strong. You want to start off with something that's going to be powerful and, really drive home the focus. And I had it narrowed down to two of the statements. And I felt like tonight's was really the best way to start off because it really shows the importance and benefit of having Christ in our life. Before we get started with tonight's topic, though, I wanted to spend a little time talking about these I am statements. The phrase I am should instantly make us think of Moses when he's at the burning bush. And he asks God, what is your name? Or when the people ask, who is this God that sent you? What should I tell him? And God says to him, I am who I am. And this is where we get the name Yahweh from. Yahweh means I am. And so the Jews would had this name Yahweh for God, and it was such a holy name that they wouldn't even say it. And so you get the Lord. That's where Lord or Adonai in Greek comes from. And if you look in your Bible, anytime you see Lord in all caps, capital L-O-R-D, that would be Yahweh or this I am. And so when Jesus says I am, it's this connection to God. And so Jews, when they hear the I am, they would instantly pick up on that. And so I am carries this reference and more importantly, the name of God. And when we hear these I am statements that are found in John, it instantly makes us think of Moses and the burning bush and I am and Yahweh. And that's a good thing because that's what it's supposed to do. John's gospel was written to prove that Jesus was the Son of God, that Jesus was from God and is God. John chapter 20, verses 30 and 31, if you want to go there, says, Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And so John shares right here that this book was written in order to show that Jesus was the Son of God. And if you go back to the beginning, in John chapter 1, Marty, he started on this, and how his sermon and my sermon go together, it was clearly a God thing. John chapter 1, it was read this morning, verses 1 and 2. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. And this, the Word obviously being Christ, being Jesus. And so John writes his account to show that Jesus was from God and is God. And John really drives home that point that Jesus is from God and is God with these I am statements that Jesus makes. And so these are here to help drive home this point so that when the Jews heard Jesus using the phrase I am, they connect it back to Yahweh. And they understand that Jesus uses I am to show that he is from God. And so it's all just kind of a big picture to match with John's purpose in writing this gospel. And so before we get into the two stories discussed in the video, I wanted to spend some time talking about light and its uses in the Bible. In creation on the first day, God created light and he said it was good. And so from the very beginning, we have this distinction, this contrast between light and darkness. And light, for the most part, has always carried this connotation of good things. And darkness carries the connotation of bad things. You think of the classic movie, Star Wars. You have the dark side. Darth Vader, he's the antagonist, the evil guy, and he's on the dark side. Darkness carries this idea of something bad and we don't like to be in the dark. From a very young age, we don't like being in the dark. We have night lights or security lights. Before Jessica and I leave our house, if we know that we're going to get back to our house and it's going to be nighttime, we turn on some lights. Why do we do that? Because we don't like coming into a dark house. You know, that's something that many of us, we don't like, just being in the dark. There's no joy that comes from being in the dark. And light is used in other places. In Exodus chapter 13, Exodus 13, verses 21 and 22. This is when, during the Exodus, they've left Egypt. It says, "By day the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people." And so at night, how did God lead his people? By fire or by light. He led them with light. And so to Jews who would have grown up hearing these stories, they'd have these stories memorized of God leading his people. And so when they hear light, they think of God leading his people, leading the Israelites after Egypt. And so Jesus comes along and says, "I am the light of the world." So not only is he using the phrase "I am" to point himself back to this Yahweh, this God that the Jews know, but he's also saying he is the light. And so Jews, their ears would almost perk up and make these connections that Jesus is the leader, the provider. And so we have this connection that light is good, that light is from God, but there's always a choice. The Israelites had a choice. They could allow God to lead them, or they could go and do their own thing. When you have light and darkness, two opposing sides, two contrasts, there's a choice. Like we said, Star Wars, Luke Skywalker had to choose between the Force, or I guess the light, and then the dark side. There's this choice. In Matthew 13, sorry, I'm having you jump around before we actually get to John. But Mark 13, verses 13 through 15. This is Jesus speaking. "This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them." Here, Jesus is quoting from the prophet Isaiah, and he's speaking about the people, and more specifically, he's speaking about these Pharisees, the teachers of the law. They have Jesus, the Messiah, the Savior, the one who is going to save them. He is going to be their light, but they are choosing to reject him. They've got eyes to see, ears to hear, but they aren't using them. It says their hearts have become calloused. And so Jesus is telling them, "Follow me. I am the light of the light of the world. I will give you light." But they aren't having any of it. They're refusing to listen. But not everyone is refusing to listen. Not everyone has a calloused heart. Jesus meets some people that are willing to listen and follow. And that brings us to tonight's stories. In John chapter 9, that's where we're going to start first. Look at that account. John chapter 9. Jesus is in Jerusalem. It's during the Feast of Booths. That's Booths, Booths, which is a feast to remember the wilderness wanderings. In the wilderness, when they were in the wilderness for 40 years, they lived in these booths, or tents almost. And so this idea of God, and so they come to Jerusalem to remember this time. And so this idea of God leading the Israelites by fire at night is already fresh in the Jews' mind. You know, that's already on their mind because that's what they're remembering right now. And then Jesus comes along. Let's start in verse 1 of chapter 9. As Christ went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Having said this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. Now, there's a lot going on in the story, but I want us to focus on this topic of, I am the light of the world. I mean, it is next to impossible to not understand the illustration here. That you have this man who is blind, who cannot see. He is in darkness. Jesus then says, I am the light of the world, and heals him. I mean, the illustration there is phenomenal, that Jesus is saying, I bring light. I allow people to see. And so Jesus is saying, when you follow me, you are able to see. Now going back to John chapter 8. John chapter 8, verse 3. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say? They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing Christ. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, If any of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go now and leave your life of sin. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. And we have this amazing story where Jesus forgives this woman that is trapped in this life of sin. She's in a spiritually dark place, and Jesus enters the picture and forgives her. Now, if we ignore the chapter headings, and just, if we were reading this, just like it's meant to be read, just, straight through, not by chunks, but straight through, we have the story where he brings this woman out of this spiritually dark place, and then right after that, he says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So they're meant to be together, and Jesus is telling us that when we choose to follow him, he provides us light. He gave the man in chapter 9 light to see. In chapter 8, we see a clear example of how Jesus gives light, brings people out of darkness. And even though we are not the people in these actual stories, these stories are here to speak to us and apply to us. We are meant to put ourselves in these people's shoes and imagine Jesus saying these things to us. Light becomes this sense of security. Light brings comfort. Light is a good thing. It's much better than darkness. And so Jesus brings light for us and gives light to us. And so whenever we might be in a dark place, maybe we feel alone and that no one loves us, Jesus brings us out of the darkness into the light. Maybe we've had a rough past where we've been abused or taken advantage of. Jesus brings us out of the darkness into the light. Maybe medical problems has taken its toll on our life, and even if God doesn't bring us through that physically, he gives us eternal light. Maybe our past is covered in so much sin, and we find ourselves like the woman caught in adultery, where our sin is out in the open. We've got all this guilt and shame, but Jesus brings us out of the darkness into the light. The song that was playing in the background of the video, I don't know if you could hear it, but it's the song called Rescue. And Hal and I, we were thinking of, what song can we put in, just kind of as background noise, basically. And I chose this song because it goes so well with the theme of tonight's sermon. I just want to read the first verse and chorus to you. It says, Lord, you know everything I've done. Every thought I've had, you know every one. And Lord, you know every time I fall, still you come to my rescue when I call. And Lord, you hear every idle word, every thought that's deep and how it seems absurd. And Lord, you give not to what I am due, but mercy, you come to my rescue. You come to my rescue, you come to my rescue. Lord, you come to my rescue. Lord, you come to my rescue every time. And that's what this is all about. When we are in the darkness, when we are in these dark places, Christ comes to our rescue and brings us into the light. But the story doesn't end there. I wish we knew more about what happened to the woman caught in adultery. I wish we knew more about the man that was healed from being blind. We're told in chapter 9 that he goes home and tells people. But I mean, talk about an amazing testimony. I want to know about them going home and sharing their experience that they had with Christ, how Christ brought them into the light. I want to know more about them. How did they, what did they do next? Who did they tell? And what kind of impact did they have after that? But it's obvious that they had an amazing story to tell people. And we were all at one point in the darkness. It was a different kind of darkness for each one of us. We were each in a unique, dark place, but we were all in the darkness, and Christ brought us out. And we have a story that we can share with other people. We can and need to tell people our story. We can tell others about the love of Christ through our lives. We can share the light with people. Tell people about the love that we've experienced through Christ. Tell people about the light that Christ gives us. Matthew 5:14, it says, "You are the light of the world." Through our story, we become the new light. We can then point others to the light that comes from Christ. And so where are you at right now? What decisions do you need to make? Christ is calling all of us out of the darkness. Christ wants all of us to enter the light. If there's anything we can do for you tonight, whether it be praying with you, whether it be helping you come to know Christ, or maybe you want to be baptized tonight, if there's anything we can do for you tonight, please come now as we stand and sing.